Hello, everybody. I'm Logan Crawford. Welcome back to Fresh Outlook. On the surface, at least, this latest case of a cop killing a teen in Missouri sounds an awful lot like the Fergson case. Take a look.
Another shooting in St. Louis. This time, an off-duty policeman shot and killed an armed suspect who fired on him.
It ended up into the gangway, at which time the young man pulled a weapon and shots were fired. The officer returned fire, and unfortunately the young man was killed. And that's what we have about right now.
Unruly protests ensued at the scene just miles from the suburb of Fergson. The suspect was described as a black male between 18 and 20 years old. The officer has been placed on administrative leave, according to the department's policy, as the investigation continues. The shooting occurred in the neighborhood of Shaw, a historic district with low levels of crime. As of September, there had been no homicides and 5 cases of aggravated assault.
We are back live now, and I am joined by the Ebru Fresh Outlook think tank. Let me introduce some of our guests once again. We are joined by Jackie Guzda of Western Connecticut University. We are also joined by Bill Rosenberg, a professor with Drexel University, and Joseph Blaettler, a criminal justice expert and private detective. Jackie, I'm going to start with you because so much of what's happening in Missouri is media fueled. What do you think is behind all of it?
Look, we had an awful shooting about a month ago. An unarmed teen with his hands up in the air says, "Don't shoot." That became the slogan for what's going on now. We've got a very unhappy segment of our populace in the St. Louis area who feel disenfranchised, who feel that they are not being heard, and they feel like they're prey to the police department there, who demographically are not reflecting them. Now, we don't know truly what happened in this last shooting. Last week, the young man could have had a gun. Perhaps he didn't. The police said that they found the bullet casing behind the policeman that allegedly he shot at. And if that's the case, it changes things to us who are looking for the truth. But it really doesn't change things to the standpoint of those people in that community. All they know is that one more of their young men went down, and they want justice. They've got a conditioned response, and I can't blame them in many instances. Joseph Blaettler, Private Eye, I'm going to turn to you and ask you about this. You've been on the front lines. When somebody is armed and dangerous, it's in the middle of a confrontation. The decision that a police officer has to make is spontaneous. What's your take on the situation?
My take on the situation is this is completely different than the Michael Brown incident.
Yes, exactly.
And I think in some ways it hurts the Michael Brown case because that's a legitimate case there with some really serious questions. In this particular case, from everything I'm reading, this was a justifiable use of force. This person fired at the police officer 3 times. He continued to attempt to fire, but the gun jammed. By all indications, he was armed and he fired at the police officer.
And he was under house arrest at the time. He wasn't home.
Yes.
And he was being charged with felony gun possession.
Right, he was out on bail.
Right.
He was out on bail for felony gun possession previously. If we're going to get to the point where cops get criticized for defending themselves, we have serious issues because, I mean, a cop was doing his job. And if the facts are what they say the facts are, that he was armed and he was firing at the police officer, you know, it's a slippery slope to go down. If the media wants to cover it because 100 people are upset about it, outraged, whatever, I think it's a serious issue because, again, the officer has a right to protect himself.
Bill, it is a very, very serious issue, and it's actually a larger issue. I mentioned before, this is a conditioned response. You have a large section of the population, young black males, who in many cases are persecuted by police officers. Maybe not in this latest case of this Myers gentleman who was shot to death, but you do have it in other cases, and because of that, people are fed up.
Well, I think what really fuels this whole issue is one about race and racism on both sides, okay? I think the reality that we are finding, even in the description of what took place between our 2 guests, was he was shot down, there were bullets, and if there was a gun, versus there was a gun, he shot multiple rounds at the police officer. So even the description about what took place is not totally clear at this point. But what is clear is that the people that are protesting are really waving the flag of illegitimacy and lack of authority. Okay, people are not wanting to follow what the police say. There was a breaking in of a minivan this week where the young child was videoing the police who were asking him for 15 minutes to get out of the car, and he refused, and ultimately they smashed his window. He thought he had the right to stay in that car. What we're really facing is a situation where there is a lack of respect and a lack of trust, both of those things, in police departments. And ultimately what we have to face is that this can't go on, because we can't live in a society where people do not want to respect authority and follow authority. So it may be a situation where someone further up the food chain, like a governor, has to come in and exert his influence over the situation.
Jackie, what's your take? We in the media have to make snap judgments. We have to tell stories in 30 seconds, 1 minute, a minute 30. We have to create heroes and villains in some aspects. It all plays into the narrative of what television news is, unfortunately. And I feel in many ways this is fueling it. It's easy to say a young black man killed by a white police officer, and in many cases it's horrible. In many cases, it's not horrible.
Well, it is fueling it, and you can see it because there are 100 more people out there, maybe more, protesting this weekend.
Who know there are TV cameras out there and might be protesting with an agenda.
With an agenda, right. But let's look at what these TV cameras are bringing to fruit. We've got people who are saying this is wrong, because as I said, from their standpoint, they have been hurt in their community and they want to see the sandwich. They don't want to see the gun. Now, the other good thing is that it is bringing the truth into our homes. You know, Pew just came out with a survey and they found out that for every 21 black kids that were killed by the police, there was only one Caucasian. That's an enormous dichotomy there in the numbers. Now, we are beginning to see, I would say, the mainstream now, with those TV cameras there, are beginning to see what the black community is perceiving, what they're going through. We not only read about their struggle, but we are living through their struggle through those videos.
Bill, Joe, what do you take out of all this?
There's definitely a disconnect between the public and the police, and we have to build a bridge to get that back together. But when the media starts to cover this latest shooting where Myers was shooting at the police, and I'm pretty comfortable that that's what happened, because, I mean, ballistically they could tell.
And also fairly, CNN and other news organizations are saying you have a black teen, you have a white cop, but the similarities end there.
Right, but when they start trying to intermingle the two cases, it takes away from the credibility of the overall issue, that there is an issue between the police and the community. And we have to focus on the real issues. And in the Myers case, if he was in fact, and I believe he was, shooting at the police, that's really not a story to me. Let's focus on the real issues. There's a divide between the community and the police, and let's build that bridge back together again. But when we distract ourselves onto issues that legitimately use of force,
it basically waters down
the argument overall.
Brown. I'm going to give everybody 30 seconds to go around round robin. What should we expect to happen with the Michael Brown case? We're waiting for a grand jury to come back. Perhaps this cop will be indicted, perhaps he won't, perhaps there'll be riots, perhaps there won't.
I think what we have to recognize is that a incident becomes a case, and each case is really individualized. You have to look at what the facts are in that case, not necessarily what is the broader public's opinion about race and police protection or police abuse in general, because each officer and each victim has to be evaluated unto themselves. And I thought it was—
The media doesn't do that, though.
No, they don't.
I'm going to cut you off there just because we only have 30 seconds. Jackie, the media makes snap judgments. The media has heroes and villains. Black and white is interesting. Shades of gray isn't, unless it's some kind of racy novel.
Right, because if it bleeds, it leads.
Correct.
And so they're showing all of this, you know, the gun, the kid, the mother crying, all of that makes news. However, what's our end game? That's my question. If it is, like you say, to bring the two factions together, the community and the police, then what we have to have is what we're doing here. More dialogue. We have to be able to see the other side's viewpoint through the other's eyes and walk in their shoes.
Joe, is the cop who shot Michael Brown going to be indicted?
From what I'm hearing, I have a feeling he's not going to be indicted. Somebody leaked a tweet, a Twitter message, that they knew somebody on the grand jury and the grand jury doesn't believe there's enough evidence there. Now that also raises serious issues about the integrity of the grand jury. But, you know, I don't know. My gut feeling is he's probably not going to get indicted.
I've always heard it's easy to get an indictment, that you can indict
Yes.
a ham sandwich.
That's true, but you do have to have some physical evidence there.
Well, you have a dead teenager who was shot by a cop. The kid was apparently unarmed, although one thing that never comes out is that this kid was 6'4" and 300 pounds.
Yes, and there
I mean,
are a
if
lot
he was
of
charging
issues.
at me, I might have to stop him.
Yes, and the fact that there was a shell casing found in the car, the cop was assaulted in the car from what the reports are stating.
I think I'm going to give you the final word, but I think the biggest issue here is black people in general have been persecuted by cops for doing things like driving while black for a long time. Every black person I know has gone through that, and they're scared to death every time they see a cop because they might get pulled over unjustly.
And I think that there's a lot of element of truth, but I can tell you that I've been driving while white, doing absolutely nothing, being pulled over by a police officer who massaged his weapon right in my face.
Right.
And that doesn't get a news story, okay? Because I'm white and the police officer was white.
Absolutely, and we talked about the shortcomings of the media a little bit before, and there are many, except on this show, of course. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the 2014 Nobel Prize winners and a look at technology when we come back.